just a great name. What is your fave game genre? This goes for the others we can't see. What's your favorite game genre? Guys in TeamSpeak.
Let's see. I kind of usually play first-person shooters, but I like to do racing games. It just depends on usually what I into. But mostly I play shooting first-person shooters.
So Neil likes first persons and then also racing. Slade, what do you like?
I'm all FPS.
Except for Minecraft.
Yeah.
This is a first-person pickaxe game. FPPA.
Yeah.
No, and me, I like first-person shooters, but I also like a lot of the third-person, like overhead. Like I'm still old school. Like I love Zelda. Legend of Zelda, like NES, great. Super Nintendo, fucking amazing. Like the N64 was cool. I mean, Ocarina of Time, that was one of the coolest of the series, I think, and I was glad that they brought it back to the 3DS, even though I don't have it. A buddy of mine has it, and I got to play around with it on there. I mean, it just looks gorgeous.
The emulator.
Shut up! I don't want the emulator. I want the real thing. I'm just kidding.
Fine.
Love you, Slade. Sorry.
Play it on your computer.
I know, but I like the old school games like that. I don't know. I know a lot of you aren't going to remember this, but if you do, throw a thumbs up or throw a hell yeah in there because Blaster Master was the fucking bomb back on NES. It was a badass game.
I had SNES. I never had an NES though.
Blaster Master was the game back in the day. Like that was the coolest game ever. It had badass music and like it was a crazy story and. If you got an emulator, play Blaster Master. It was freaking fun as hell. The other one, I love Evolution games. Do you remember, Neo, you might be old enough. Do you remember Evo, The Search for Eden? On Super Nintendo?
Sorry. I never had a Super Nintendo. All I had was a television.
Really?
Yeah, do you remember those?
Yeah.
Those are really old.
Yeah, they are. So, I mean, but yeah, I love the older school games. Now, on the newer games, I do like first-person shooters. Everybody's always asked, you play Halo? I'll play Halo with you. No, I'm not 5. Sorry, it has to be said. You averagely, all you hear on there is, it's just like, shut up. I don't want to play with that. It's more frustrating just hearing all the chat going on than anything else. So, yeah.
What about the campaign?
I like the campaigns on them. But see, that's the same thing, too. Like, I like the Gears of War 2 campaign. The story was great. I thought it was badass. Wish it was a little bit longer. The gameplay for multiplayer, I was like, oh, let me run around really slow and shoot big guns.
Yeah.
Like, it was terrible.
Yeah, Gears of War is for their campaign, not for their multiplayer.
Yeah.
Let's see. You ain't lived unless you had a Super Nintendo. Those things have the best Mario games I've played. Yeah, Super Nintendo games, and that's one thing that's big. Here's the thought process to think about, guys, is Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and the Genesis Master System. There weren't really games out before that. I mean, there were games like on, the 6200 and stuff like that, and like the ColecoVision. Nobody probably remembers that at all. But, I mean, there were games out, but you had like Tank, and it was like little blocks. But whenever Nintendo came out, Super Nintendo, the Nintendo Master System and the Sega Genesis and the Sega Master System, whenever those came out, there weren't really a lot of games before that. You had the ones that were in the arcade that made crossovers, but people were just like, hey, I got this idea for this fucking turd that flies around and you spit corn at people, and they're like, let's make it. And it was just a game that came out. So there was so much more innovation in that time frame than nowadays. Everything seems to have really been done. So every game that you play is just kind of like a redo of some other game that you've played before. So, such great games on the Super Nintendo. I mean, look at the great games that came out. You had Pilot Wings. You had games like Pilot Wings. The original Pilot Wings came out. You had games, I mean, you had the SimCities, which came out on PC beforehand, but you had games like the Evo and the Search for Eden that came out. You had games like all the Super Mario Brothers. You had games that come out with just different crazy fun stuff. Donkey Kong Country. I mean, they were so much fun to play and so hard to do. It was ridiculous. That was like, in my opinion, one of the best times for gaming. Don't get me wrong, we've got some great games that are out nowadays. But how many games have you bought and played and lost interest or beat it after 5 hours? That didn't fucking happen back in the day. You played fucking Mario until your fingers bled. You know how many times I played through Donkey Kong Country? Yeah, the replay value was insane, and it could have been just because times were different and like you much more appreciated what you got at the time. But in that same sense, how long can you sit there and play Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball 98 or 97 or whatever the hell it was? No, way before that, 94, 92. You can only play for so long. It was just like that's just what happened.
Well, back in those days, they didn't have connection to the internet, so the games had to be amazing.
Well, and in that same sense, Sega Genesis was the first system to come out with a multiplayer control support. You could plug the telephone line to the back to it. You got a little adapter. You plugged it in the back, and you were on the Genesis, the Sega Network or something like that. I remember because my buddy had that. And we used to play Sonic because they had a little multiplayer arena type thing that you could do in like Sonic 3 or 4. And the Sonic Spinball, and so it was just like, it was terrible. Like, you had no idea you could be playing with pedophiles in, like, Ethiopia or something like that, for all you know. But it was really funny. You're like, I don't know who I'm playing with. There was no chat, no communication. A lot of times it just timed out and paused, but it was the first. So, yeah, sorry about going off on a rant about that, a little tangent.